The moment that broke me happened on a Monday morning, with 12 people watching and HR silently listening. We were halfway through our team meeting when my manager leaned back in his chair, smiled like he was joking, and said, "Let's be honest, if Nadia left tomorrow, we'd replace her in a week." No one laughed. No one defended me. The silence was so loud I could hear my own heartbeat. I felt my face burn as every eye flicked toward me, then quickly away, like embarrassment was contagious. I had spent 5 years building systems this team relied on every single day, but in that moment, I was reduced to a disposable name on a spreadsheet. I looked at the screen and realized HR was still on the call. They heard it. They wrote it down. And what my manager didn't know, what he never suspected, was that this wasn't the first thing I had documented. It was just the one that ended him. The meeting ended like nothing had happened. Calendar reminders popped up. Cameras switched off. People logged out and went back to their lives. I stayed frozen in my chair, staring at my own reflection in the black screen, trying to slow my breathing. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against my desk. Then my Slack started lighting up. That was awkward. He didn't mean it like that. "You okay?" No one said, "That was wrong." No one said, "I'll back you up." I closed Slack without replying. A minute later, a private message came through, from him. "Greg, don't take it personally. I was just setting expectations." Setting expectations. That I was disposable. That my value could be joked about in front of people who decided my future. I opened a blank document and typed the date, the time, the exact wording he used, and who was present. I attached the meeting recording. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. I only knew one thing. This wasn't going to be forgotten. As I hit save, another notification appeared. A calendar invite. Subject: quick check-in. From Greg. Time: 4:30 p.m. And suddenly, I understood something that made my stomach drop. The comment wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. And he was already making his next move. The meeting invite sat on my calendar all afternoon like a threat disguised as a courtesy. No agenda. No context. Just 15 minutes with Greg and a title that sounded harmless enough to deny later. At 4:29, I joined the call. Greg appeared already smiling, already relaxed, like the morning never happened. He asked about my weekend, commented on my growth trajectory. Then he leaned forward and said, casually, "I've been getting some feedback about your attitude lately." My heart sank, but my face stayed still. He talked for 5 minutes straight without naming a single mistake, a missed deadline, or a measurable issue. Everything was vague. Energy, tone, fit. Words that couldn't be disproven because they weren't real. Then he delivered the line he'd clearly rehearsed. "I just want you to know, visibility matters. And reactions like this morning? They don't help." Reactions. I hadn't said a word. That's when I understood what this meeting really was. Not a check-in. Not feedback. A paper trail, his version. I thanked him for the clarification and asked one simple question. "Can you point to a specific example tied to my performance metrics?" He paused. Just for a second. Long enough. "We'll circle back," he said. "Let's keep this constructive." After the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I opened my document again. I typed every sentence he used. I noted the lack of specifics. I saved the call recording. And then I realized something that changed everything. He thought he was building a case against me. But with every word, he was building mine. And he had no idea how much evidence I already had. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was panicking, but because something finally made sense. I opened old folders on my laptop and started replaying meetings from the past year. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. That this was just one bad manager having a bad day. Then I saw it. The meeting where Greg interrupted me 3 times and later repeated my idea as his own. The email where my name was missing from a project summary I had led for 6 months. The performance review that praised my output but warned I needed to be less assertive. It wasn't random. It was systematic. Every time I delivered something critical, My visibility shrank. Every time I spoke up, I was labeled difficult. Every time I succeeded, the credit quietly moved upward. I searched my inbox for one word, replaceable. Nothing came up, but a dozen other red flags did. Phrases like not the right fit long term, we'll reassess your role, let's manage expectations. All vague, all careful, all designed to sound harmless if anyone ever questioned them. That's when the truth landed, heavy and undeniable. Greg wasn't reacting to me. He was preparing for me. Preparing to push me out slowly enough that it would look voluntary, clean, justifiable. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by timestamps and files, and felt something replace the humiliation. Clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't failing. I was being managed out. And if Greg thought I hadn't noticed until now, he was already too late, because I had just finished organizing the evidence. What I didn't know yet was that HR was about to notice it too. The email from HR arrived the next morning, polite and bloodless. Thank you for sharing your experience. We take these matters seriously and would like to understand how the comment made you feel. How it made me feel. Not whether it was appropriate. Not whether it violated policy. Just how it made me feel, as if this was about emotions, not conduct. I stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. I didn't write about embarrassment or stress. I didn't mention sleepless nights or shaking hands. Instead, I did something Greg would never expect. I replied with facts. I listed the date and time of the meeting. I quoted his exact words verbatim. I attached the recording. I named every person present. I referenced the company policy on respectful workplace behavior and managerial conduct, word for word. Then I added a single sentence at the end. Please advise whether this constitutes acceptable managerial behavior under company policy. No accusations. No emotion. No room to minimize. HR replied within the hour. Thank you for the clarification. We are reviewing this internally. Reviewing. Internally. That was it. No follow-up questions. No reassurance. No timeline. But something had changed, and I could feel it. For the first time, HR wasn't asking me to explain myself. They were reading. And somewhere between their silence and Greg's confidence, I realized something unsettling. If HR was this quiet, it wasn't because nothing was happening. It was because something already was. By lunchtime, I understood the silence. HR wasn't ignoring me. They were deciding how exposed they were. I received a second email, this one shorter and far more formal. For record-keeping purposes, we are documenting your concern as a formal complaint. You will be notified of next steps. Formal complaint. I read the words twice, then a third time, feeling the weight of them settle in my chest. This wasn't a vent anymore. This wasn't feedback. This was a file, with my name on it and Greg's attached. I replied with one line, thank you. Please confirm receipt of all attached evidence. The confirmation came back almost immediately, and with it, something else. A calendar block appeared on my schedule for the following week, HR follow-up, confidential, with 2 HR representatives listed instead of 1. That was when I knew Greg still didn't know. He was still walking around confident, still cracking jokes in meetings, still assigning me work like nothing had shifted. He even complimented me that afternoon, loudly, in front of the team, as if praise could erase what had already been recorded. I smiled. I nodded. I delivered everything on time. Because the truth was, this wasn't the only thing I'd filed. It was just the first one HR had officially labeled. And if Greg thought this was over, he was about to learn something the hard way. Once something is on record, it doesn't disappear. It multiplies. 2 days later, Greg sent another calendar invite. This one had an agenda. Performance alignment discussion. I almost laughed. Almost. The meeting started exactly how I expected, him leaning back, hands folded, voice calm enough to sound reasonable if anyone ever replayed it. He said he wanted to support me and reset expectations. Then he opened a document I'd never seen before. It was a list. Vague bullet points. Needs to be more collaborative. Struggles with tone under pressure. Concerns about long-term fit. No dates. No examples. No metrics. I waited for the part where he'd mention missed deadlines or errors. It never came. When I asked how these concerns aligned with my last performance review, which rated me exceeds expectations, he smiled and said, "Performance is evolving. This is about trajectory." Trajectory. Another word that meant nothing and everything. That's when it clicked. This wasn't feedback. It was insulation. If HR came back with questions, Greg wanted a document ready. Something he could point to and say, "See? There were issues." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I did something far more dangerous. I asked him to email me the document. "For clarity," I said, "so I can address each point." He hesitated, just for a second, then agreed. The email hit my inbox 5 minutes later. And the moment I saw it in writing, with his name at the bottom and no evidence attached, I felt a calm settle over me. Because now I understood the game. Greg wasn't trying to fire me yet. He was trying to make it look deserved. And every step he took to protect himself was leaving a trail that led straight back to him. That night, I didn't respond to Greg's email. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Not on my desktop. Not in the cloud. Offline. Dated. Organized. Inside it, I started a spreadsheet. Column 1. Date. Column 2. What was said. Column 3. Who was present. Column 4. Evidence. I added the replaceable comment first. Then the attitude feedback. Then the performance document with no metrics. One by one, the pattern laid itself out cleanly, unemotionally, undeniable. I cross-referenced everything with company policy. I highlighted the language HR used: retaliation, protected activity, hostile environment. I didn't guess. I didn't assume. I matched words to definitions. Then I started confirming everything in writing. After meetings, I sent polite follow-ups, just to recap our discussion. Please confirm if I misunderstood. For alignment moving forward. Greg replied quickly, confidently. He always did. And every reply locked him in deeper. By the end of the week, I had timestamps, contradictions, and a paper trail that told a very different story than the one he thought he was writing. I wasn't fighting him. I was letting him talk. Because the more comfortable he felt, the more careless he became. And soon, he was going to say something he couldn't explain away. The shift was subtle at first, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. People stopped looping me into emails. Meetings moved without my calendar invite. Decisions I used to be consulted on were suddenly announced as done. In group calls, Greg spoke over me more than usual. When I corrected him, he smiled tightly and said, "Let's take that offline." Offline never came. One afternoon, a coworker I trusted messaged me privately. "Just a heads up. Greg's been saying you're stressed and pushing back a lot." His framing it like concern. Concern. Another mask. I thanked them and closed the chat, my chest tight but my mind clear. This wasn't personal fallout, it was strategic isolation. If things escalated, he wanted the room already leaning his way. Later that day, Greg sent a team-wide email reassigning a task I'd owned for months. No explanation, no conversation. Just a quiet removal. I replied all with one sentence: "Happy to transition this. Please confirm this change is effective immediately." He replied yes. That confirmation slid neatly into my folder. By the end of the week, I was being treated like a liability everyone was afraid to stand too close to. And I understood why. People protect themselves first. What Greg didn't realize was that every cold shoulder, every exclusion, every sudden realignment was doing something far more dangerous than humiliating me. It was proving retaliation. And I was one incident away from filing again. The next incident came faster than I expected. Friday afternoon, Greg announced a strategic adjustment during a leadership sync I was still invited to, barely. The flagship project I had designed, scoped, and delivered for over a year was being reassigned. Not because of performance. Not because of bandwidth. "Fresh perspective," he said, smiling. I didn't speak. I waited until the call ended, then pulled up my spreadsheet. I compared dates. Protected complaint filed, Monday. Performance meeting, Wednesday. Project removal, Friday. The sequence was almost generous in how obvious it was. I emailed HR immediately. No emotion. No speculation. Following my formal complaint on date, my core responsibilities have been removed without documented performance justification. Based on company policy, I believe this constitutes retaliatory reassignment. Please advise. I attached the before and after project ownership, Greg's confirmation email, and the meeting recording. HR replied 30 minutes later. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are adding this to your existing file. Adding. Not opening. Not reviewing. Adding. That single word told me everything. This wasn't an isolated issue anymore. It was a pattern, and HR could see it clearly enough to stack it. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and felt something unexpected, relief. Because now there were 2 complaints. 2 timestamps. 2 violations. And Greg was still acting like he was in control. He wasn't. He was just making the case stronger. That night, I stopped pretending this job still had a future for me. I updated my resume, not from scratch, but strategically. I reframed the work Greg had minimized. I quantified results he had blurred. Metrics replaced narratives. Outcomes replaced opinions. I applied quietly. No LinkedIn announcement. No open signals. Just precision. By Tuesday morning, a recruiter emailed me back. By Wednesday, I had a screening call. By Friday, they were asking for references. Each conversation felt surreal, not because I was desperate to leave, but because no one questioned my competence. No one hinted at tone or fit. They asked about impact. They listened. I realized something unsettling. The version of me Greg was trying to sell internally didn't exist anywhere else. While he was building a story about my decline, the market was validating my value in real time. I didn't tell HR. I didn't tell my team. I didn't tell anyone. I kept showing up. I kept delivering. I kept documenting. Because this wasn't an escape plan. It was leverage. And soon, I was going to need it, because the next move wasn't going to come from me. It was going to come from HR. The invite arrived just before lunch. HR follow-up, confidential. 2 representatives. A note-taker. No Greg. That alone told me everything. The call opened differently this time, measured, careful, almost legal. They didn't ask how I felt. They asked me to confirm timelines, to verify attachments, to clarify intent behind specific phrases Greg had used. One of them said, slowly, your initial complaint qualifies as protected activity. Subsequent changes to your role are being reviewed in that context. Protected activity. I stayed quiet and let them talk. They acknowledged the performance document lacked objective criteria. They noted the proximity between my complaint and the project removal. They asked whether Greg had contacted me outside formal channels. I forwarded the messages while we were still on the call. There was a pause. Not an awkward one, a professional one. Then HR said something that shifted the ground under my feet. We're expanding the scope of our review. Expanding. This wasn't about the comment anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about whether Greg had done this before, and whether the company had missed it. The call ended with clear instructions. Greg was not to discuss performance, role changes, or alignment with me without HR present. When I logged off, my inbox refreshed. A message from Greg, sent 10 minutes earlier. Hey, let's sync later. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I stared at it, then forwarded it to HR without responding. Because for the first time since this started, the power dynamic had shifted, and Greg didn't know it yet. He thought this was still a misunderstanding. HR knew it was an investigation. Greg stopped smiling after that. In meetings, his voice was flatter. He chose his words carefully, like each sentence was being weighed before it left his mouth. When he addressed me, it was brief and public, never private. But the damage was already done. HR emailed again that afternoon, asking for one more clarification. Not about Greg's comment. Not about my performance. About impact. Can you confirm whether any actions taken after your complaint affected your visibility, responsibilities, or advancement opportunities? I didn't rush my response. I listed the project removal, the meeting exclusions, the sudden performance concerns that didn't exist before. I attached timelines. I attached screenshots. I attached Greg's own words. At the end, I added a sentence I had copied directly from the employee handbook. Adverse action following protected activity may constitute retaliation, regardless of intent. That was the phrase. Intent didn't matter. Meaning Greg couldn't explain this away as concern, coaching, or coincidence anymore. HR wasn't asking why he did it. They were asking whether it happened. And it had. Within the hour, HR replied with a single line that made my stomach drop, not with fear, but with certainty. Thank you. This information will be included in our formal review. Formal review. Not discussion. Not mediation. Review. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my calendar. Greg had no meetings scheduled for the rest of the week. And suddenly, I realized something he hadn't yet. This was no longer a situation he could manage. It was a process he couldn't control. The recruiter called me while I was making coffee, like it was just another normal day. We'd like to move forward, she said. Senior title. Immediate start. 30% increase. I didn't react right away. I thanked her, asked for the details, and requested the offer in writing. My voice was steady, almost detached. When the email arrived, I read it slowly. Higher pay. More authority. No Greg. I didn't sign it. Instead, I forwarded it to my personal email and closed my laptop. At work, Greg avoided me entirely. Meetings were rescheduled without explanation. Decisions stalled. The team felt tense, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't name. That afternoon, HR emailed again. Please do not make any employment decisions at this time. We will advise shortly. Employment decisions. They weren't talking about me. They were talking about him. I looked at the offer letter again and felt a strange calm. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't scrambling. I wasn't begging for fairness. I had options. Greg, on the other hand, was running out of them, and he didn't even know the clock had started. Because the next meeting on my calendar wasn't with him. It was with HR and legal. The invite appeared late that evening. Organizational update, leadership sync. Mandatory. All hands. HR included. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but recognition. This was Greg's move. The meeting opened with him unusually formal, shoulders squared, voice rehearsed. He talked about efficiency, structure, and realignment. Corporate smoke meant to blur sharp edges. Then he said it. As part of this adjustment, some roles will be restructured to better support our goals. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. I watched faces on the screen flicker, surprise, relief, avoidance. Greg spoke carefully, never looking at me directly, as if that alone could keep him safe. He was halfway through explaining the transition plan when something unexpected happened. HR interrupted him. Greg, let's pause here. The silence that followed was different from the one on Monday. This one had weight. HR continued, calm and precise. This conversation needs to continue offline. We'll follow up with next steps. Greg froze. The confidence drained from his face so quickly it was almost startling. The meeting ended abruptly. No questions. No wrap-up. Just screens going dark. I sat there, heart pounding, realizing what had just happened. He tried to move first. He tried to make it look clean. And HR stopped him in real time. Whatever was happening behind the scenes had reached a point where they couldn't let him keep talking. And for the first time since this started, I knew, without a doubt, that the next call wouldn't be about my role. It would be about his. I didn't have to wait long. An hour after the all-hands abruptly ended, HR called me directly. No calendar invite this time. Just a number on my screen and a quiet sense of finality when I answered. They didn't waste time. Greg has been instructed to step away from all people management responsibilities effective immediately. For a moment, I said nothing. I let the words land. They explained that my documentation wasn't being reviewed in isolation. It had been cross-checked against internal records, feedback logs, prior complaints, exit interviews that suddenly read very differently in context. Then came the sentence that made everything click. Your file shows a sustained pattern, not a single incident. Pattern. That's why HR had gone quiet. That's why their tone had shifted. That's why legal was now involved. They told me my role was not being restructured. It never had been. The organizational update was halted because it conflicted with an active investigation. Before ending the call, HR asked one final question. Are you aware of any additional instances that may be relevant but not yet submitted? I thought of Greg's message after the HR warning.